Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. I'm your host, Tom Schwab, and today's conversation is one that you don't want to miss. We're diving deep into the shifting landscape of digital marketing with none other than the one and only Rand Fishkin. If you've been in online space for any length of time, you know Rand. He's always ahead of the curve, from pioneering SEO strategies with Moz to redefining audience intelligence with SparkToro. He's the guy that doesn't just follow trends, Rand creates them. And today we're tackling one of the biggest marketing myths out there. Does more traffic really mean more business? Rand's got the data to prove that the real game isn't just about getting seen. It's about getting seen by the right people. We'll talk about why podcast interviews, targeted engagement, and smart audience research can be more powerful than just chasing viral reach. So if you're tired of the spray and pray approach to marketing and want to learn how to actually connect with your ideal clients, stick around. This episode is packed with insights that you can use today. Let's jump in. I met Rand years and years ago. It's probably decades ago, right back when we were talking about keyword stuffing and people were doing, link farms. Yes, we are old in this. And one thing I've always noticed that he's at the cutting edge of things. And we've learned so much about audience insights, where the world is going from SEO to LMO. And Rand, just thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here, Tom. Thanks for having me.
I talked a little about where we were. Talk about where we are today, because we're at this weird space of, the world is changing. We're moving from SEO to LMO and with audience engagement and everything. So big picture, where do you see where we are right now?
I'm going to be honest with you, Tom. I'm pretty skeptical of whatever acronym you would like to use to describe appearing in large language models. I'm not saying that people aren't using them. They are. But a tremendous amount of that use is nothing to do with discoverability or search or finding a brand. Google just had their earnings report a couple of weeks ago, and they reported that last year searches grew about 10% year over year, and that was higher than the growth the year prior. The number of searches per searcher grew. If you're trying to find it, I think a lot of reporters and journalists and media and influencers are trying to find a story where AI tools are replacing Google. The data does not support it. It really doesn't. I think for some people, right, especially for the sort of people who are most active in our LinkedIn feeds, those people are trying to ride this bandwagon of there's a huge large language model. AI tools are taking over. Google is dead. SEO is dead. They're just looking for a story, man. I don't buy it because I don't see it in the data. What I do see in the data is a huge shift over the last decade from search engines being the only place where we find stuff to one of 5 or 6 different sources. And the other sources are other sources of influence. And that is podcasts, YouTube channels, websites, email newsletters that we subscribe to, social media. That stuff has absolutely become huge for discoverability. And unfortunately, none of that stuff is sexy enough to compete with the AI story.
And I love how you always go back to data, right? Everybody has an opinion, but you always make it very clear of this is my opinion and this is the data that supports that.
Are there people who don't do that? And if so, why? It's always confused me, right? It's very strange.
And the old thing, one experience is a data point, right? That is not a series on there. And when I worked in medical devices, there was always this joke that if you have one occurrence, well, that's a case report. If you have 2, that's a series, right? And if you have 3 and one of them doesn't align with the other 2, that's a perfect series, one lost to follow up, right? So just paying attention to the data that you want to.
There's a lot of people doing that these days.
There is. And so with the data that you're bringing here, where do you see audience intelligence really having the power in this, because SparkToro, I will tell you, has revolutionized our business. When we look, no, thank you. Like, because we will have, I can think of one client. He was amazing, right? Young man, had started up 3 businesses, had sold them. He was probably his late 20s, high school dropout. And we said, what podcast do you want to be on? And he said, I want to be on IdeaCast by Harvard Business Review. And I'm like, we've gotten people on there, but you know what? The chances are, if you don't have the unicorn, they're not going to have you on it as a high school dropout. But what you want to do is you want to talk to their audience. And he's like, yes. And I said, we got a tool for that. So if all the people that go there, what other podcasts do they listen to?
Yeah.
So, how are you using audience intelligence to decide where you want to be seen, right? On podcast interviews, those sort of things.
I want to say, first off, we're a poor example for most. And that is because we're in a very privileged position of getting invited to, 10 podcasts or webinars or LinkedIn Lives or, YouTube channels. And we can say yes to maybe 2 of those. I'm often doing 4 or 5 podcasts in a week. Or equivalents, right? And lots of events and those kinds of things too. So that is extremely unusual. I'm happy to talk about why that is, like, what drives that desire to have myself and Amanda, our VP of marketing, both of us get invited to a lot of shows and stuff. I could talk about that. But in terms of what we do, we don't have to do a lot of pitching. We don't have to do a lot of identification of channels. Look, Tom, I'm going to tell you the most embarrassing thing about how I get invited onto podcasts that I want to go on, which is I'll usually just leave a couple comments on that person's LinkedIn. And I don't have to say, oh, I would love to be on your podcast. Like, I will go to their LinkedIn, they post something, and I'll be like, wow, this was a great interview. I really got a lot from this. And then I'll, like, 8 times out of 10, I'll get a LinkedIn message from that person saying, oh my God, Rand Fishkin, would you come on my show? Right. So that's not how it is for 99% of people.
Well, and that's just do a decades of Whiteboard Fridays, and then you'll be an overnight success, right? Of going out there, getting known. Well, let's flip it around then. So if you get 10 requests, right? How do you decide on which 2 you say yes to? Because that's the bigger question.
Yeah, we go plug the website into SparkToro, see if their audience is the audience we want to reach, which makes a lot of sense. It's essentially, we have kind of the job descriptions and roles and titles and behaviors that we know are our best customers for SparkToro. And new audiences that we want to try reaching if we're in an experimentation phase, that kind of thing. And so we basically look, for example, your audience, Tom, is a perfect, 100% match for what we're doing. And so, well, obviously we know each other and we've done stuff together before, right? So a little different, but you look at what SparkToro says, we go to the demographics section and then look at the words that appear in the bios of people who listen to your show or visit your website. And that tells us, get on Tom's show.
I love how you're starting with the audience, because one of the things that we have to talk with people, it's like this idea of, well, bigger is better. Well, no, better is better, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. Why do you want to reach 100,000 people, 99,000 of whom won't care about you? The way I think about this very much is in terms of, I want a high percent of the audience to be interested in whatever I'm presenting, whatever we're presenting. And I think this should be true for everyone who wants to reach their audience. Unless your job is, I don't know, running for president or something, you want to reach a targeted audience, not the largest possible audience. And especially in B2B, you can kind of kill your own conversion rates. You can hurt your engagement rates. You can make your email list less valuable and lower your delivery rates if you attract a lot of people who are not actually interested in what you're doing and providing.
Interesting. I never even thought the impact there. I always thought of it as just, people say you want more leads. No, I've got to work leads, right? I've got to hire another 4 sales development reps to kiss frogs before they get it. It's like, give me the sales cylinder, not the sales funnel. But I never thought about deliverability there too.
No, every single platform these days is algorithmic, right? So you name it. YouTube is an algorithmic platform. TikTok's an algorithmic platform. LinkedIn, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, like every single one of these platforms, algorithmic based. And that means they're going to reward not massive reach, but rather engagement with the targeted audience. And then they will show your content to more people like that. Email works a little differently, right? Email is based on, did people open your email? Did they click it? Did they report spam on it? Did they throw it in their, junk or trash? Did they hit delete, archive, whatever? And so we're looking for that maximum engagement as a percentage of the people that we reach in order to continue growing our customer base by reaching the right audience rather than sort of burning out our algorithmic reputation across these platforms by getting the wrong people.
Right. And I loved how you said there, you're trying to grow your customer base. That's what you're optimizing for, not too many optimizing for leads, right? To me, leads are like Facebook likes, right? The bank doesn't care about them.
Yeah. We don't even have the classic concept of, leads. That SparkToro is a free product, right? So people come to SparkToro, they sign up for free. You don't even put in a credit card, right? You just email, and then we verify that, and then you can use the product for free forever. And a good percent of the people who use the product in a given week or month sign up for the paid version because they want more from it, or they're going to be using it actively. And that's our funnel or our cylinder.
And it's really that audience. And as you were talking about that, made me think of back in the days when people were saying it's a numbers game, right? Just go out in the ocean. And you're saying, no, find a barrel, right? I'd rather go fishing in a barrel than I would in the ocean.
Well, and I really think of the ocean for us is essentially our top of funnel is basically the social platforms where we can reach people, right? So this is, or content platform. So, LinkedIn, YouTube, Threads, Blue Sky. We used to be very heavy Twitter. Now Twitter is almost useless. Facebook a little bit still. Reddit, actually, some of the subreddits drive a good bit of traffic for us. And then lots of, non-algorithmic platforms like content sites. So meaning, journalistic types of publications inside the digital marketing field, and advertising field a little bit, and lots of podcasts and YouTube channels and sources of influence, people who have influence in the field. That's our world. And then if we attract their interest, right? If you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, SparkToro sounds interesting, then you might go to SparkToro's website. And what we don't do, Tom, is we don't try and track it, right? Look, if you're listening to a podcast and then you see this podcast comes out, and then we look at SparkToro's numbers and we see a 10% or 15% week over week lift from, last week and from the same calendar time period last year, we're like, well, that was probably Tom's podcast, but there's no way to prove it. And we don't care. We don't care about proving attribution. Proving attribution, I think, is a fool's game, and it always was. And yeah, I feel dumb for all the times that I stood on stages and was like, here's how you show attribution in 2014 or whatever.
So talk about that, because there's like this myth of perfect attribution. And that's one of the things that we'll hear people say, well, where are all the numbers for this? And there's this idea that you can have perfect attribution because Facebook or Google shows me the real numbers. So why can't you? Yeah. Can you explain that? Because you understand this better.
Look, if someone tells you Facebook ads and Google ads, that's showing me perfect, accurate attribution, I am going to, wow, there's a lot of misunderstandings going on there. So first off, let's imagine that you are Google's chief financial officer, and you go to the attribution ads team, right? The analytics team. And you're like, hey, do you boys think you could take credit for a few more of the conversions that are going to happen anyway? Obviously, that is what Google has been doing for 20 years, right? Is saying, hey, we already know Google has, access to virtually every, internet connected device on the planet. And they know every URL that those devices are going to be visiting before and after they purchase anything. And so one of the things that Google has gotten extremely good at is making sure that their ads show up in the places they know you're already going to visit before you buy. And then after you buy, Google Ads gets to take credit for that sale. I'll give you the most simple example. So let's say you like, this hoodie that I'm wearing, right? This colorful hoodie. So it's by a company called Orlebar Brown in the United Kingdom. And so you browse around the internet. Maybe you visit their website and you see the sweater and you're like, oh gosh, that's kind of a pricey sweater. I'll wait for it to go on sale, whatever. And then 4 months later, you search for Orlebar Brown again. You're like, yeah, I really want that sweater. It's the perfect time now. And Google has got an ad, right, that Orlebar Brown is paying for up at the top there with their brand name and their website. And it has a little sponsored, a little ad, thing. And so you click that, you go to their website and buy. And why does Google get credit for that sale? Google did nothing, absolutely nothing to help make that sale happen. The only thing that Google did was be the intermediary, right? They're essentially the white pages of, 1985, but on the internet. They were no help at all. But your CFO, your CMO, they're going to look at the ads, at the attribution. They're going to say, put more money into Google. We're getting more sales from Google. It's mind numbing, right? It's just they're just taking credit for sales that were going to happen anyway. My suspicion is about half of Google and Facebook's revenue comes from sales that were going to happen anyway that they're able to take credit for because they're able to be in the stream of buyer journey that they know is happening. And the only way to test this is to bring your ad spend way down in the places where you suspect Google and Facebook are overcharging you, and then see what percent of your sales happen anyway. Could be that it's 10%, could be it's 50%, could be it's 95%. And you won't know until you test it.
I can see how that works on a product, right? With services, I always wonder if it's the quantitative or the qualitative. Like one of the questions I love to ask people is, how did you find out about us? Right? And it might not be the first touch or the last touch, but to me, it's the most meaningful touch, right? And I
got a story for you, Tom.
Please. And so when I look at it is if you're doing sweaters, right? You're doing tens of thousands of sweaters, but if you're doing professional services, it may be, 10 or 15 clients a year. What do you say to that? And I'm looking forward to the story.
Yeah. So when SparkToro started, one of the things that we try and do is we say like, hey, these are the sources of influence for any given audience. So that this, one of our very earliest customers was I don't have permission to mention their name, but they're a direct to consumer. I think they're now in grocery stores as well, actually, direct to consumer food brand. So they sell a food product, historically online, now also in grocery stores. It's sort of a beloved food product by, amateur chefs and like foodies, people who really care about their cooking. And this food brand had on their website how did you hear about us? And their VP of marketing was like, well, to be honest, that's how we make a lot of our channel investments. Our CEO, our executive team, like really loves the responses from that. That's how we choose how we, want to prioritize our spend. And I had two things for them. One was, if you prioritize your spend based on only the people who buy from you, how will you ever reach the people who didn't hear about you? it's impossible, right? You're only ever going to invest any budget in sources that are already sending you visits and traffic and people who want to buy. You'll never expand. And the second one was, hey, VP of marketing, would you run this test for me? Here are these 3 sort of notable food influencers. I think one of them was like Martha Stewart and Alton Brown, these people who are big in the food world. Would you just, in that drop down, when you ask people how they heard about you, would you just add those people in there? And of course, the VP of marketing was like, but they've never talked about us. So we have no relationship with them. They've never said anything about us. I'm like, yeah, just try it. 30% of all their customers said that they had heard about them from a source that had never mentioned them. I will never trust that data again.
So that's how you can get Abraham Lincoln to endorse your product. Just add it to the dropdown.
I mean, look, man, surveys are great for some things. They're great for asking about very basic demographics. Male, female, non-binary. What's your age? What year were you born? Great for asking what's your geography. Good for asking things like, do you shop more online or more in store? Those kinds of things. People are pretty good at answering those things. And over time, you'll get reasonable accuracy. But if you want them to tell you very specifically, which channel did you hear about us on, or which source of influence, or how many YouTube videos do you consume in a week, or what email newsletters do you subscribe to? People cannot tell you those things. You cannot reasonably expect a human being to give you accurate answers. Even a group of human beings, the accuracy is going to be worse than not asking. So my advice is use surveys for things surveys are good at, use interviews for things interviews are good at, and use passively collected data for things that passively collected data is great at. And that's where stuff like clickstream data or crawling people's social profiles, right, and seeing what they actually subscribe to, those are great for these types of things. It's like saying, hey, which keyword did you search for us? Did you search for in Google to get to our website? Even though people could click the back button and tell you what that is, the accuracy is terrible versus, if you look at your whatever Google search console and it says, here's how many people searched for this, that data is reasonably good.
Yeah. Ask them questions that they know the answer to, not that they just have to guess or make up an answer to go to the next one. So what other things, here we are in 2025. It's like people think it's this way, but it's not, right? What things do we still believe about the earth being flat in marketing that just aren't, the data doesn't support it?
The big one for me is there's still a huge focus on getting traffic. Like web traffic is still a huge KPI for a ton of people. And I would argue that traffic is actually a vanity metric. It doesn't directly help you. Like we were talking about before, do you want to reach a big audience or do you want to reach the right customers? I want the right customers. I want the people who are going to pay for my product, use it, like it, spread it to their friends, share it with their teams, get value from it. Everyone else, I think it's totally fine if they want to consume my content on not my website, which means I get much less traffic. And the biggest trend of I think last year and this year has nothing to do with AI. It is traffic is down, revenue is up. So at the start of our interview, you mentioned HubSpot, right? Which kind of we met through that one of that company's events, and HubSpot had this big sort of viral story in the field that I used to be in, the search engine optimization world. Tons of people writing all about it because HubSpot had lost 70% of their blog traffic in the prior quarter, few months. I don't remember, 4 or 5 months, whatever. Right. So their traffic had just tanked. And people were, talking about, well, what did they do wrong? And where did they get these redirects? And they had these 404 pages and, they lost all this content, whatever it was. And the first thing I did when I saw the story was, let me look up HubSpot's stock ticker and let's see their earnings report. Well, they had a record-breaking quarter and their revenue went up and their stock price went up. So I'm guessing no one gives two craps about the blog traffic being down by 70%, right? No one's bonus is dependent on that. Hopefully no one's bonus is dependent on that. And so I have been seeing tons of these examples. Actually, I have a whole presentation I'm giving in Germany in 3 weeks that's all about this. Basically, it's the end of web traffic as we know it. But I feel fine. I don't think that's a big deal. I think that influencing people is going to increasingly already is happening in the platforms where they already pay attention. It's kind of a tragedy. Like, I love the early web. I know, you and I both love the early web, where essentially it was tons of small websites, small businesses, everybody could get traffic. People were visiting all these different sites. That's not the direction that the data is showing us that anyone's going. What is happening instead is that people are spending 70, 80, 90% of their online time on about 10 platforms, right? It's YouTube, it's TikTok, it's Reddit, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's LinkedIn, it's Google. And those platforms are all sending out way less traffic than they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. They are keeping it for themselves. They realize that their bottom lines can be improved by addicting people to their platforms, by penalizing posts that put links in them. Google is answering 2/3 of all searches without a click. We are in a zero-click internet. This is also called dead internet theory. If you've heard sort of the pop culture words around dead internet theory, right? It's essentially like the web is just becoming 12, 15 different places that we all go and we all spend our time there. Well, you know what? That sucks. I hate it. But also, I don't mind uploading my short videos to Threads and Facebook and LinkedIn and Blue Sky and Twitter, and having people consume the content in the place they already pay attention. And there's no reason I have to include a link back to my website. Like, I just don't need to.
Do you think that same argument could be made for leads, right? Because it used to be more traffic, more revenue, more leads, more revenue. And that's one of the things that I have seen where people will say, well, we want to get more leads. I'm like, then give away a Tesla, right? And it's like, how will that help? I said, because everybody will register for it, right? It's a lead. Well, that won't help me get clients. Well, are you looking for clients or leads? And I've also heard people talk about, well, it's supposed to be magnetic. It attracts everybody. And I'm like, that's not how a magnet works. It attracts some and it repels the other.
I was going to say, if you give away a Tesla, you will attract about 29% of Americans and repel the other, 40%.
And I was going to say, and depending what it was a year ago, it might have been switched, right? From that, but it doesn't, if you're just optimizing for leads, that's what you'll get. If you're optimizing for traffic, you could get that. That doesn't mean you're going to get the value from it.
I think it's very reasonable to say, hey, when we influence people in all these places, when we post our content, right? Instead of publishing a white paper and requiring an email to get access to the white paper, we're going to take the sexiest 1/3 of that white paper and distribute it across all of our channels publicly. And we're going to find influential people in publications who want to cover that story. And they're going to be able to use the graph and the data and all the stuff, the cool stuff that's in the white paper. And they're going to mention our brand name and talk about us. And then the people who really care about our product, the people who really care about, like, hey, I want to dig more into this. This sounds very interesting. Who's this company behind it? What's this product they're describing? How'd they do this research? I want all that. Great. They're going to become your high quality leads, and they're going to find you. They're going to type in your brand name, your domain name. They're going to search for you in Google. And hopefully your CMO will be smart enough to not attribute that lead to Google, right? Because no branded search, in my opinion, Google does not deserve credit for any of those. And so I think that's sort of if I fast forward 10 years in marketing world, I think everyone will catch up to that reality. But today we're still stuck in the last 25 years, which we're so focused on how do I get the most traffic and then convert that traffic to leads and to customers.
Do you think it's also changed on black hat and hacks, right? Because it used to be everybody was looking for what's the newest hack. Well, you got to keyword stuff, or you got to do a link farm, or, you do these things. And it seems to me that it's changing so quickly, right? That it used to be you get black hat and then you get punished for it. And now it seems like it's getting updated so quickly that I'm not hearing about the hacks. And it's like, could it be that the people that are actually doing good work will win?
I would say sometimes. I don't know. My cynicism is high, right? I think the last, at least in my lifetime in the United States, people doing the good work tend not to get rewarded, and people doing shady, crappy stuff tend to get rewarded. But I will agree that I haven't seen a lot of very effective black hat and hacky stuff working well in search and social media for a while, with one exception, the one exception being AI stuff. So there's a lot of people doing what used to be considered organic best practices types of investments, but they're doing them at scale with AI, which, if you're a discerning user, very easy to spot, very annoying, hard to understand why they bother. Right. So every LinkedIn post that I put up, I get 20 to 50 clearly AI bot written posts from what look like real people, right? Who've authorized like an AI agent to access their LinkedIn and then just leave comments. I don't know why. Like it's very confusing to me. I think the goal is they think that someone will see them in my comment feed and then like click on their profile or something. Yeah. And you can see this, like Twitter is a bot haven. My Twitter account historically was much more human. Now I rarely get a human comment, but I'll have 50, 100 comments from bots and AI powered agents on any post that I do. So that's where I think the black hat stuff is happening. You can see it in your emails, right? Your email, I'm sure, is filled with AI spam.
And I love asking you the opinion questions, because you can always tell when you pause and you don't have the data, you give the opinion, right?
Yeah,
and I respect that on you. So the last opinion question here, right? Purely from your perspective, right? You've been in front of the camera for years, decades. You've been a podcast guest. What would you tell someone else that is looking to do podcast interviews to grow their brand, grow their business? How should they think about that?
Ooh, yeah. I think one of the best things that you can do for sure is you want to find your unique voice and the things that you're passionate about and interested in before you start pitching yourself as a guest. Because one thing, you're a fantastic example of this, Tom. You know lots of other podcasters, and people who podcast and who have YouTube channels and LinkedIn Lives and every kind of like source of influence where you have a video or audio connection. Those people know each other. They listen to each other's stuff, and they decide the guests often based on who was a great guest on somebody else's show. And so you want to be a great guest, and that means putting their audience before your audience. Think of this like you're going over to your fiance's house for a family's house for Thanksgiving. Like, make a good impression on the hosts, right? Serve them. Don't try and be self-serving primarily. Like obviously we talked a good bit about SparkToro today, but I try to be shy about that. Like, I don't want to promote my own stuff. What I want is for your audience to hear me and be like, yeah, I want to follow that guy. I want to see more stuff that he's talking about. If they're a podcaster, I want them to be like, gosh, I'd like to have him on my show. That's the goal and aim. One really good tactical way to practice this is build up a little YouTube channel or upload your videos to LinkedIn or whichever platform, Threads is best for you. Get engagement on those videos. If you can do short form video well, you tend to be able to also answer interviewer questions really well. And you have exciting and interesting things to talk about that people care about. if those videos are getting engagement, it means that topic was interesting. It means that podcaster is going to want to have you on to discuss those things. That's the best advice I've got.
That is awesome. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others. Rand, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, my email is rand@sparktoro.com. So anyone's welcome to drop me a line anytime. I actually reply to all my emails, except if an AI emails me, I will report spam on you. And I can be found on most major platforms, Rand Fish. So got a YouTube channel that is just getting started, and a more mature Threads and Blue Sky and LinkedIn and Facebook if you're on there too. And then SparkToro's blog is where we put up sort of kind of our best of the best stuff. And so if you want a post a week approximately from Amanda and I, that's where you'll find it.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Rand.
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks for having me again.
Wow. That was a masterclass in audience first marketing. A huge thanks to Rand Fishkin for breaking down why bigger isn't better. Better is better when it comes to reaching the right people. Now, here's the big takeaway. It's not about more traffic, more clicks, more leads. It's about attracting the right audience who's ready to engage, values what you do, and take action. Whether you're using SparkToro to map out your audience interests or strategically leveraging podcast interviews to position yourself as an expert, the goal is to create real connections. So here's my challenge to you. Look at your marketing efforts this week. Are you focusing on vanity metrics, or are you truly building your relationships with the right people, your super consumers? If you want to dive deeper, start by engaging with your audience where they already are, just like Rand does. And if this episode sparks some ideas for you, I'd love to hear about them. Connect with me on LinkedIn and share your biggest takeaways from today's show. And as always, if you're ready to harness the power of podcast interviews to grow your brand and your business, head over to interviewvalet.com to get started. Until next time, keep showing up, keep serving, and keep sharing your message with the world. They need to hear it now more than ever.